Good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Monday, November 26th. Work from home. All the days look the same. 2018. We got a lot to talk about. Tonight I want to talk about Russia, Ukraine, the Sea of Azov, and what is likely to happen or what this is all about. How confused everybody is, what they think is going to happen next. It's really important to understand that this provocation between Russia and Ukraine has been in the making all year, and it goes back to March when the Ukrainians seized a Russian fishing ship, the Nord, back in March, claiming that it was fishing in Ukrainian territorial waters off the coast of Crimea, which is insane because Ukraine has not owned Crimea now for close to 4 years or over 4 years. So it started there, and then it's just continually gone downhill all year long as Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko and his handlers at the U.S. State Department, CIA, and the rest of it and British intelligence, I'm sure, have concocted various little schemes, little pieces and parts of this scenario that led up to this weekend's events. So I spent a lot of time today getting caught up on this. I spent a lot of time working on an article that I just put into editorial over strategic culture. And that should be coming out hopefully in the next day or so. There was a UN Security Council meeting this morning where the usual suspects, i.e. Germany and Sweden and the Netherlands and Poland and the United States and Great Britain, all condemned Russia for being horrible and all the rest of it. And it's nonsense. Understand what actually happened. It's a little convoluted, but pretty straightforward. And there's really good commentary over at Moon of Alabama, over at the Saker. I absolutely urge you to read some stuff from Rostislav Ishenko has covered this, all of this stuff with Ukraine and Poroshenko far better than I ever could. And in effect, kind of predicted exactly the steps that Ukraine would take in order to try and get the Russians to strike first, or strike in such a way that they can sell it to the world that the Russians struck first, in order to get the world on their side, so that then NATO can come in and act like and be able to act like the adult in the room and all of this stuff. Right? That was the plan. This was absolutely a transparent ploy by the very powerful neoconservatives in the United States government, as well as British intelligence and others, to goad the Ukrainians into doing this. Remember that the special envoy to Ukraine for settling the dispute between Russia and Ukraine is none other than Kurt Volker, who's the former head of the John McCain Institute. He's about as card-carrying a neocon as John Bolt. So what happened over the weekend is pretty straightforward. Understand that the main reason we cannot and will not recognize Crimea has to do with the Kerch Strait and the Sea of Azov. Now that I think about this, I don't know why this didn't occur to me earlier, but the more I look at all this, it's really very obvious. Because the Kerch Strait becomes Russian territorial waters for 12 nautical miles on either side of the strait. That means the entire entrance to the Sea of Azov is Russian territorial waters. Therefore, they have absolute every right under maritime law, international law, and everything else to restrict access to the Sea of Azov if they feel it's in their national interest, and if they feel in any way, manner, shape, or form that it's the work of hostile actors. And so commercial traffic is able to go through underneath the Kerch Strait Bridge with no problem. Has never been an issue. Earlier in the summer, Ukraine sent some ships through the Kerch Strait, military ships, naval ships, through the Kerch Strait. But in order to do so, they had to get permission from the Russians, which they acknowledged they had to get. Were escorted by the Russians with a Russian officer on the deck of the ships through the strait and everything else. Poroshenko, of course, said this is a great victory for Ukraine. No, dude, you just accepted, you just actually acknowledged the fact by doing so that that the Kerch Strait is Russian territorial waters. And then since March, the other thing that's happened is that the friendship agreement, the basic foundational framework of relationships between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, Poroshenko unilaterally abrogated over this just last month. Now, Poroshenko makes a couple of really important points, and made them while Poroshenko was making this. Was declaring that he was going to do this. The friendship agreement defines the border between Russia and Ukraine. That friendship agreement is gone. The border between them now is nothing more than a guideline, legally. The border still exists physically, as much as any border can exist physically. But legally, the whole border between the two of them is now open to interpretation. What Poroshenko and the United States and the neocons were hoping for is that Putin would then rush in and immediately recognize the Donbass, the breakaway republics, Lugansk and Donetsk, and even allow them to move to hold a referendum to be absorbed into Russia. And then that would create yet another opportunity for us to scream, look, Russian aggression, look, Russian expansion, look, Russian imperialism, and all this rotten nonsense. Putin didn't take the bait because there's no reason to. What Putin has done is restrict access across for people who work in Ukraine going into Russia, who live in Ukraine and work in Russia, in order to continue to undermine Poroshenko's political position back home. Because who wants to vote for the guy in the next couple of months who just made it difficult for you to go make a living in a country that is literally on its fucking knees? So, but by doing that, by abrogating the friendship treaty, not only is the border now fluid legally, but now the argument can be made, not particularly convincingly, but this is the argument they're going to make, especially the neocons will make, that the Sea of Azov is now international waters, and that NATO has every right to enter the Sea of Azov because it's now international waters. It's no longer it's no longer coastal property of basically Russia and Ukraine. Which is not going to fly, but it's not going to fly at all. Not with Putin. So, for a couple hours last night, the Russians, I'm sure you guys all saw the pictures of the Russians parking a big old freaking freighter right under the Kerch Strait Bridge and saying, that's it, we've blockaded all movement across the strait until further notice. They seized the 3 of the 5 ships that they're trying to make their way through. And then it was just released. I don't know if you guys saw this. I saw it both on Zero Hedge and a couple of other places that statements have already been made by members of the crews of the seized ships that, yes, this was a clear provocation. They were ordered to stop. They refused to. Captains of the ships refused to acknowledge the Russians who were hailing them. There was a Ukrainian intelligence officer running the entire operation from the decks of one of the ships, the whole 9 yards. And what I find interesting, and I tweeted this out earlier, what I found interesting about this, those guys, I mean, it's not like the Russians have to torture them here. The morale in the Ukrainian armed forces is nearly non-existent. And at this point, anybody who's still really working, who's still, their armed forces at this point are at least half people just happy to have a freaking job and 3 squares, 3 hots and a cot because of the situation. And the other half, at best, being generous here, are, patriotically motivated Ukrainians who hate Russians. So that's all of the geopolitical background. You tie that into the fact that there's going to be elections in March. Poroshenko is not going to win re-election. The United States and the Brits are freaking out that they're going to lose their conduit. Yulia Tymoshenko, who's in the lead at this point and most likely to take over if the polls were to hold today, is unreliable from a U.S. point of perspective. And so all this work that we've put into to destroy Ukraine and all of these, and remember, all of these people have at a certain level, all of them are implicated at every level in Russiagate. Right? There's ties, all of this stuff ties back to Browder, Khodorkovsky, Russiagate, the Clintons, everybody. They're all implicated in all this shit. But the Russians aren't going to move into Ukraine unless they absolutely have to. And Poroshenko is looking to shore up his position by inflaming Ukrainian nationalism long enough to stay in power. So he stupidly moved for martial law, ham-fistedly tried to move for martial law that would actually move the elections out too far in time. And apparently there was a 5-hour argument on the floor of the Verkhovna Rada today over his martial law declaration, which they had to pass. And he wanted 60 days because 60 days would make it nearly impossible for them to hold elections on time. And they forced him to cut it down to 30 days so that they could still have elections. And of course, Stoltenberg at NATO is saying, oh, this is a good thing. The Ukrainians aren't trying to not hold elections. And, oh, no, really, we're not. Or this is all very normal. And the Russians are all bad. And like, pull both of my legs. One plays Jingle Bells and the other one plays You're Full of Fucking Shit. Jesus. I tell you to pull my third leg, for Christ's sake, but, I like to try and keep it a modicum of clean. So, hey there, everyone. All right, so first 15 minutes are by the board. Those are most of my comments for the evening. This stuff's really important. Very obvious that this was timed with increased shelling in the Donbass, along with the chemical weapons attack in Aleppo. It was insane. All of this is really, really bad, and just truly terrible. But very obviously necessary from a number of perspectives, because God's forbid Putin and Trump have a conversation at the G20 this weekend that isn't fraught with a bunch of garbage. And this is garbage. Ukraine is not even an interesting subject. It's only interesting from Pat, please stop doing that. All I see now is that, and I'm going to lose everybody else's comments. Okay? And there are already many comments that I wanted to respond to that are by the board now that I can't see. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but please stop. Talking to one of the commenters on Periscope. So, the So we have the G20 coming up this weekend. Putin and Trump are supposed to talk. They were supposed to talk a couple weeks ago, but Macron put the kibosh on that. Now we've got Bolton and the rest of them trying to put the kibosh on the meeting now. Russia came out and said they're more than willing to discuss a new version of the INF treaty. The only problem with that is we don't, in effect, what they said is we don't believe that the U.S. will hold to it. But we're happy to have a discussion about all this. I mean, seriously, let's have this discussion. The Russians have been welcoming an arms control discussion since we, abrogated the ABM treaty back in 2003. It's insane. Not like the Russians aren't the ones willing to talk. Just like it's not like it's the Iranians aren't the ones willing to talk. Give a break. I mean, Trump can blow smoke up everybody's ass all he wants, saying, "Well, President Rouhani has an open invitation to come visit, to come talk to me whenever, wherever." Like, dude, fuck you. Why should I talk to you? It's like, what the hell do we have to talk about? It's insane. And yes, so let's get to the comments now, because I'm watching some of them go by the board and I do want to cover some of them. So yes, Mark Bogosian, you're absolutely right. There are real people being harmed by this. Ukrainians, Russians, everybody is absolutely being harmed by this. Ukraine, worst of all. And this is the worst part of it. We destroyed the Yanukovych government, playing on the dissatisfaction, well-earned dissatisfaction, or well-justified dissatisfaction of the Ukrainian people with Yanukovych, in order to try and take Sevastopol and run the Russians out of the Black Sea. And it's failed, and now we just can't let it go. It's really sad how much it's like all of this is about people who just will not let go of their failures. Oh no, we still have power here. We're going to use it and we're going to do this. Now we'll just make this move and then we'll make that move. And it's terrible because none of these people who are in power give one fucking erg of a rat's ass about the people that they're harming. They could give a shit. These people are unbelievable psychopaths. It's insane that we have to sit here and we watch these things and we sit here having to parse all of these moves and think like them, because we have to just dispassionately go, well, this is the move, counter move, this, and it all comes down to the irrationality of frankly a bunch of fucking Jews who hate Russia. It really is what this comes down to. And it's just sad. And I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of tiptoeing around it. Because this is exactly what it's about. And they have the and they have the power structure within the United States government, British intelligence, the rest of it. It's not just Jews, but it is being. Ugh. These are people who do not know when to stop. Elite globalists, and all of the rest of it. They want it all for themselves. The Syria thing, you're using 13, you're right. The Syria thing, interestingly, didn't get anybody worked up. There's a reason for that. Because it was demonstrably pulled off by the bad guys. Because the narrative in Syria has completely changed. It's completely changed. There's no way for these people to spin any of this. AIPAC's not out there putting words into Nikki Haley's mouth because she's already been fired. Right? Netanyahu is persona non. Where the hell is Netanyahu in all of this? Nothing's going on. All of this shit's blowing up. Where is he? It's so obvious that these people have been neutered in every freaking way. The only people Bolton, Haley, and Pompeo care about, the only humans they care about are themselves. There are riots at the embassies in Ukraine. You don't think that that's astroturfing? You don't think that that's like, you don't think that that's, you don't think that's not paid for? Are you kidding me? By provoking the Russians to shoot at Ukrainian boats, was it mission accomplished? Mostly. But they're not going to get their blood because the Russians worked quickly to put out the statements by the Ukrainian sailors who said, yeah, this was all a false flag. That's out there now. For 24 hours, this thing lasted. And then because this is what happens when you try and force a situation that's so obviously not true and not real. When you try to force obvious untruths. For so long, you have created a vacuum of information and morale and despair and all of this stuff. These guys, you look at the guys who the Russians got a hold of. It's so obvious. Like, I look at these guys, I'm like, they're there for a job. That's what they're there for. They're not gonna die on a hill for the fucking Poroshenko government. Give me a break. Why Putin? That's why the Russians seized the ships, so that they can lean on these guys a little bit and say, look, let's diffuse this entire situation. What do you know? Because it's obvious that your fucking president's out of control and obviously a puppet of a foreign regime. Let's, give us a hand here. It's insane. And it's sad. And so I want to go back to something Scott Colvin asked me earlier because it was a good question and I didn't get a chance to ask it. Good thing it was on YouTube because I can scroll back over here. What's the chance that Ukraine stays together? It just looks like a temporary nation. Look, Putin has been playing for time and certainly for these elections for a couple of years now. It's very obvious that he really, no, he's the chocolate king, I remember. It's really obvious that he's been playing for these elections to go through, and then he was going to try and work with the new government that comes in to try and diffuse the situation as best he could. And what's obviously happening now is we're doing everything. And I think the Brits are really behind most of this. I will be frank and honest here. I think the U.S. is behind part of this, but I absolutely think the British intelligence is behind a lot of this because this entire operation was timed with the Brits making the announcement that they're sending special forces now into Ukraine. So that opens up all manner of opportunity for more false flags everywhere, all over the place. So it's insane. Because the Brits are absolutely and utterly up to their fucking eyeballs in all of this corruption in every level, including obviously Russiagate and everything else. And this is why I can't connect all the dots. I can't cross all the I's and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. But you just fucking know that this is all freaking MI6. Just fucking know it. So it's so obvious at this point. The British deep state has just won Brexit. Okay, they just destroyed Brexit. The British deep state is deeply involved in destroying Syria. It's deeply involved in trying to destroy Trump. It's deeply involved in destroying Ukraine. It's over the top, out in the open now, saying that they're trying to overthrow Russia. So, can Ukraine survive this? No. But Putin's not going to move an inch further. Is not going to move an inch further west. If he can help it. He would rather the entirety of southern Ukraine secede on their own and are able to establish their own country. All the way from Odessa and Transnistria, all the way across to the Russian border. Now, obviously, so that brings us to Moldova, where the last gasp of Soros's NGO plan finally got some results. By the way, I don't know if you guys saw that Soros is pulling his he's pulling Open Society Foundation and all of his NGOs out of Turkey. There's a reason for that. Because Erdogan was going to have them all jailed. So, I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but that one's a big one. So, Scott Colvin answer your question. No, I don't think Ukraine survives this in any current form. I absolutely think that from Odessa to the Russian border, all of Donetsk and Luhansk are going to be under independent control. They're going to be independent of Kiev by the time this is all over. So, you just wait. Moldova won't be able to. And look, Moldova's government's not going to last either. These people aren't happy. They're not happy with those people either. Everybody. Oh, by the way, did everybody notice that after? In Armenia, right? The failed color, the successful color revolution that happened in Armenia. Yeah, Pashinyan, had to step down because he couldn't form a government. And I got lambasted by this fucking retard who, I'm sorry, he's a fucking retard who apparently lives in Armenia, thinks he's a libertarian, and was telling me, like, I went on and on and on in email with me that this is the most libertarian government overthrow of all time, and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a fucking Soros color revolution, you stupid twat. I mean, seriously. And I turned out to be absolutely right about that. Because Pashinyan couldn't hold his stuff. He couldn't hold anything together. No one actually wanted him in power. He came out of freaking nowhere. They ginned up. It's like the same thing they did with Ukraine, right? There is always somebody and some percentage, measurable percentage of the population that doesn't like the sitting government. You don't think you couldn't get 15% of the United States under the right conditions to rise up against the friggin' Trump administration? Dude, this shit, they do it every day. So if you push in a certain way, if you create a wedge issue that gets everybody hot and under the collar for a couple of weeks, you can gin up anything you want. So, it boggles the mind that people are having a hard time seeing any of this. It makes me crazy that I have to I try to be fair about this stuff, but it's really obvious that Armenia was an attempted color revolution. I mean, because Pashinyan gets into power and then turns right around and says, yeah, no, we're not going to stop having, he's been pro-EU his entire life and pro, Armenia in the EU, and then all of a sudden he starts to have trouble getting a freaking coalition together. He's like, no, I'll meet with Putin. We'll have a good relationship, and no one believed him. MJ Stojanovich's quote. Comment is perfect. Putin leveraged the Azeris threat against the Armenians and the fact that Armenia is surrounded by enemies. Soros and the CIA overplayed their hand. Absolutely. There was no way Armenia was going to go for that. Not with Erdogan and Turkey and the Azeris and having we having the Obama administration having ginned up conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh and the rest of it. Like Putin's been a good actor for, been a good friend to Armenia and Armenians. It's insane. There was no way that was going to continue, and it was just like I couldn't believe this guy kept going on and on and on. I'm like, dude, you're no libertarian if you think that this is not a color revolution. You're one of these dumbass sheltered fucking navel gazing libertarians who go, oh my god, freedom. I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. Just grow the fuck up. Nothing happens in this world without a reason. Like, of course, I proved to be. I mean, he had a lot of good information on the ground, but it was all his own anecdotal evidence. It wasn't real. You can see it from the 15,000-foot level. It was pretty obvious what was happening. And the same thing with Ukraine. So I don't think that they're going to get, and I don't think this thing will have any legs at all. I think by the time we get to the G20 on Sunday, no one will even care. Because if NATO's not talking about moving ships in there to patrol and police the Kerch Strait, which would be a complete act of war. Yeah, exactly. If you don't have NATO calling for this, and all we've got is some tepid, what do you call on Russia to, yeah, okay, nothing going. So ultimately, I don't see any of that much. Do you see Western Ukraine being annexed by Russia or made a puppet state controlled by Putin? I do not see Western Ukraine. No, Western Ukraine is the seat of most of the anti-Russian sentiment in Ukraine. That's where the ethnic Ukrainians are. And they don't like, and generally speaking, they're not happy with the Russians. It's the eastern part of Ukraine and the southern part of Ukraine, which is mostly ethnic Russian, that the United States and the Brits want to still have control over. Why we won't leave Afghanistan? Yeah, we'll sign a peace treaty with the Taliban, but we want to keep all our bases there. We want to keep all our military there. No, that means it's still an occupied country. So I don't see that happening. What I see is, Putin knows that that Donetsk and Luhansk are not necessary for the Russian Federation at all. Crimea, yes. Crimea was absolutely necessary. Strategically, tactically, in every way, Crimea was necessary. But Lugansk and Donetsk, no. They don't need to be a part of the Russian Federation, at least not anytime soon. And they honestly should be their own countries. Or they should form Malo-Russia, which they announced themselves as Malo-Russia last year, as Zakharchenko did. And they signed the agreements and everything else. And 6 months later, he was blown up in a car bomb. He was blown up having coffee. The blood here is wholly on Poroshenko in the United States' hands. There's nothing else going on here. And I don't know that Poroshenko is going to survive this. With only getting a 30-day martial law declaration. I don't see that. I don't see him surviving this. And that would be a good thing. Because at that point, Tymoshenko can come in and be a rational broker. She will be able to sit down and start playing both sides. And she's not pure as the driven snow, and she's not her. I mean, she's a mess as well, but let's not, she's not good, but she's certainly better than Poroshenko is. He's just your typical Ukrainian corrupt oligarch. I mean, dude, he just looks like he's now starting to look like he's freaking crazy. Yeah, I mean she does, but she's also not stupid in that. Yeah, she also is not stupid and knows that the United States and Europe are not Ukraine's friends. That we're just using them for their own purposes, for our purposes. I think that there's a greater chance of her cutting a deal with the Russians than there is the possibility of cutting a deal with Poroshenko. Remember, the gas transit deal between Ukraine and Russia ends at the end of 2019. They're a year away, and Poroshenko is actively trying to provoke a war. At what point does he think he's going to be able to? He's going to be able to heat his country. I mean, it's insane what we're having him do. Yeah, I know she was thrown in jail based on. I know all of that about Timoshenko. I also know that tomorrow that March 2019 is a lot different than the past, right? So, and that Ukraine is in a much different place today than it was then. But we'll see. She may not win. She may not be able to put a government together anyway. I mean, we all talk about Poroshenko having a 7% approval rating. And news for you, she's only polling 13%. No one is going to wind up in charge at the end of the day. It's just as likely that he turns around and that Poroshenko turns around and just continues to declare martial law, or just abrogates, or just takes complete control anyway. Turns the place into a friggin' banana republic, which it already is. But the United States can't back that. That would be the worst possible outcome, right? Why everybody was very quick to say, "Oh, he's declaring martial law, but there's still going to be elections," right? Because we still have to look like we still have to look like the good guys when we're doing this. And that's the weakness that Putin always exploits. He understands the way the American political drama works. He understands it very well. And that the best way to win any confrontation with the United States is to put us in the position of looking like the bad guys. It's all we really have to do. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Putin just says, look, we don't have a deal. I'm not sending you gas. Ukraine's out there saying they're going to, they just took Russians to court for $1.3 billion worth of damages for reparations for annexing Crimea. But you don't even recognize the fact that Crimea was annexed by Russia or reunified with Russia. You don't even believe that they declared independence. Doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense. Poroshenko goes around saying we've been at war with Russia for 4 years. Well, then if we've been at war with Russia for 4 years, why were you sending warships directly at Russian warships in the Kerch Strait? And then are outraged when they fire on you. I know Crimea voted. I know all of that. Don't get lost in my choice of words every once in a while. It's not important. I was literally probably the first English-speaking person on this side of the Atlantic writing about the fact, always using the word reunification as opposed to annexation. I steadfastly have called it reunification the entire time. Are you kidding? I cried watching that ceremony, because it was so obvious that they cared, that this was an incredible moment for the Russian people. I welled up a little bit. I'm like, dude, this is really moving. I didn't even really understand it at that point, but I understood the situation. I understand people. And a guy like and a villain like Poroshenko is fucking insane. He's just a villain at this point. And he's a cartoon. And, that's what we have. And every day that he is in power, he makes himself look like more and more of an idiot and undermines the credibility of the people who back him. Merkel, Macron, Theresa May, and the rest of them. But Theresa May doesn't give a shit. Oh, why are Westerners so opposed to Crimea being with Russia? Well, what do you think? Russia can't have the Black Sea. If Russia has the Black Sea and Russia has a stable means by which to patrol its and secure its southern border, then Asia can't continue to be destroyed. The Russians can actually get stuff to port and get goods to port and have a real economy with the rest of the world. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. It's deeper than that. It's the whole Mackinder Heartland idea. We foment chaos in every country, in every area bordering Russia. In every way. So here's the takeaway from all this. Is the thing you won't hear from many. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. Oh, by the way, we'll be on with Halsey tomorrow night at 9:00, and we'll be on Fault Lines in the morning at 9:20. With Lee Stranahan and Garland. Here's what you won't hear anywhere else. George Galloway had a great article, short article on RT. I don't know if you've read it or not, talking about this situation. And at the end of that article, he made mention of the fact that Theresa May is on her last legs. So is Emmanuel Macron. So is, in his mind, he lumped Donald Trump in there as well. I'm not sure that I agree with that assessment, but let's go with it for a minute. Every one of them is in a really tenuous situation, along with Poroshenko. They all need a wag the dog moment to gin up support for their failing governments. It's a nice idea. But it's a little obvious. There's a little preview of what I wrote for Strategic Culture this afternoon and what you'll read later in the week. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that's part of it. If that works out, great. I think what this is, if they stay in power, great. But I don't think any of them are expecting to stay in power. I see all of this as nothing more than a big poison pill. Theresa May knows she's done once the Brexit deal is either... Theresa May is done no matter what happens with Brexit. If the deal passes, she's done. She shepherds the deal through. There's a vote of no confidence against her. The Tories throw her out. Labour takes power. Because the Tories will split. Labour will back will back the vote of no confidence because they'll take power, and that'll be that. And there'll be snap elections and the government will. On the other side of it is if the deal fails, the same thing happens. There'll be a second referendum. And then the Brits will, the deal will fail. There'll be a second referendum. Labour will take over. So May is done. So the best she can do at this point is to leave an incoming Labour government with all the same shit that Obama left Trump. So she's done. So what do? You have a pro-Palestinian, relatively speaking, pro-Russian, relatively speaking, leader of Labour, one who just, who's not abjectly against Russia existing as a concept. leading labor. What do? It's pretty obvious at this point that May is done. So the most likely outcome here is that in the short term, Jeremy Corbyn takes over as labor, as the leader of the British government. Because they won't be able to get rid of him immediately. That'll be too obvious. So they have to leave him with stuff that he can't deal with in order to make him look weak, ineffectual, and worthless, so that he can be overthrown and moved out, and somebody else take over. Because that's the way these things work. So her job now is to poison pill everything, especially Russia. Merkel's doing the same thing on her way out the door in Germany. She's pushing for every bad idea that destroyed her chancellorship and destroyed her government, destroyed the political parties that she leads, and all of her coalition partners and everybody else. She's doing everything that's EU first. Army, poking snake with Russia. The only good thing she's done is to shepherd Nord Stream 2 through. Everything else, I think it is. Did I lose you guys for a little bit? Certainly hope not. Let me know if everything's all right. Because it looked like we had a real loss of people for a while. All right. Well, we're almost done anyway. So Merkel is leaving poison pills everywhere for whoever comes behind her. Macron is doing the same thing in France. He's not going to survive. U.S. deep state is saddling Trump with everything they can throw at him. So, I mean, look at where we are, guys. It's really obvious what's happening. But again, Putin understands all this. I'm not in any way worried about, his reaction to this. He's just, okay, fine. This is what we're dealing with. This is what we'll deal with. So, yeah, I don't know what happened. We might have had a blip. But I've noticed a couple of really sharp drops where people dropped off and then were forced back on. I have no idea. My bandwidth is notoriously bad, but I've been watching my stream health coming on my end of it all night, and it's been solid. So my daughter's asleep; she's not feeling very well, and Camille's downstairs spinning milk. Actually, she's downstairs making cream. I need cream for my coffee. So, Trump has a much better survival rate than May or Merkel or the rest of them. Don't take this discussion to mean that I think that Donald Trump's going to get deposed. No, he's too disagreeable for that. He's too much of an asshole for that. They can't throw him out of, they will have to throw him out of office. They will not be able to get him to step down. The migrant caravan is failing. Absolutely. It's looking worse and worse and worse and worse. I think mostly, Pat, thank you for the support about my daughter, but I think that's what happens when you eat nothing but carbs and sugar for three and a half days. Thanksgiving, and the pie and the brownies, orange juice and everything else, and these are lessons that she needs to learn. But she's well aware of the dietary issues. Now she just needs. Frankly, we all did, so it wasn't. I'm not throwing any stones here in the glass house that I live in. So people will carry Macron out of office at this point. I think it's fair to say that he's got himself in a serious heap of trouble. So, yeah, last 10 minutes. Lisa Pate, you are off topic about the Valentina Zarkova video about global warming, about the sun. But absolutely, if you guys have not watched that, and I just noticed 9 people dropped off the stream. So I think I think YouTube's fucking with us tonight. I think it's absolutely necessary that you read the article that I have up on my blog over at goldghostsandguns.com, Jumping the Global Warming Shark. I think it's absolutely necessary that you try to understand what Zarkova is presenting, because what she presented as a scientist, and I mean, and don't kid yourself, I am in a former life a scientist. Okay, as an undergraduate, I was working with the high energy physics guys in the chemistry department at UF. If I had wanted it, I had a very promising career as a high energy physicist for all intents and purposes. So I understand. I was doing kind of high energy laser spectroscopy as an undergraduate. So I understand what she was doing. I understand that leap of logic and faith and all of the stuff that she was doing. And in effect, all she was doing, for those of you who don't know, she was trying to figure out, when she studies the sun, she studies the sun's magnetic field. And she just looked at the sun's magnetic field output, which we have good data for because we have satellites in orbit monitoring the sun all the time. This is one of the few things government is actually good for every once in a while. They put things up in orbit and then they collect data. And sometimes that data doesn't suck. And in this case, because, well, they put satellites in orbit measuring magnetic field strength, this is pretty fucking simple. So even government can't screw this up. And yes, many Russian physicists have been predicting an ice age for the last 20 years. But the thing about what Zarkova's come up with, and what was very, very important, was she asked us a very simple question. And it's the kind of question that I've done this before in my own life, in my own research in the past, in everything I've ever done. When I do this, like geopolitics, like what's so important about the Kerch Strait Bridge? I'm like, a very narrow passageway, and it cuts off the Sea of Azov, which is a strategically important body of water. Right? Why would Russia want Crimea that bad? That's why. It's the same thing when scientists sit down and they ask a question that once they ask it, everybody goes, holy shit, yeah, that's a really good question. Like everybody with half a fucking brain, with 3 brain cells to rub together and make a spark, goes, holy shit, that's a great question. We were focusing, because for years, the global warming argument about the sun doesn't really matter because it's a constant has always focused on heat output. The sun's, the sun's raw heat output doesn't vary by more than, 0.3%. I think it's 0.3%. Not a lot. Yeah, by showing, and what she did was she said, look, it's not the heat output that's what's interesting. It's the magnetic field strength that's interesting. Because the magnetic field of the sun is what shields us from the hostility of the rest of the universe. Because the universe is a cold, dark, hostile place that's actively trying to kill you. You're not paranoid. Okay? The universe is trying to kill you. This is just reality. Jordan Peterson's not wrong. The world is dangerous. It's trying to kill you. I live in Florida. Everything's trying to kill me. Anybody who doesn't believe that life is tenacious hasn't been to fucking Florida. Seriously, dudes. So, by asking the very simple question, what if the sun's magnetic field output, which is variable in a predictable way? What if it's made up of multiple magnetic fields? And then at that point, it's simply just a mathematical transformation to see if it's correct. Mathematical transformations like Fourier transforms or Taylor series, or there's a number of different mathematical Laplace transforms and whatnot. And this is where the math for me gets a little hinky because I stopped caring about math once we got to that level. I got to third semester calculus and differential equations, and I went, not really interested anymore. I mean, honestly, once we started integrating over, non-Euclidean space, I'm like, not really interesting anymore. Not fascinating. It just, I got all and I realized at that point that I wasn't really a scientist as much. I wasn't interested in science as science. I was interested in science as philosophy. A friend of mine the other day said to me, he said, dude, I actually have to cringe every time you call yourself an economist, because you're not really an economist. You're more of a philosopher than you are an economist. You care about the nature of truth and the nature of these things and how all of these disciplines get to truth. Like, all right, that's fine. But I still like to call myself an economist because, I like to dabble in markets every once. But the simple truth is that that's why I stopped, in effect, my education. I never got my PhD because I wasn't really interested. To me, at that point, it was really, I learned what I wanted to learn. I gleaned from it all the shit that I really cared about. I gleaned from it that Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is really, really, really fucking profound. And I understand quantum mechanics well enough to know what she was doing was correct, even if I couldn't do the math myself. So all she did was effectively a mathematical transformation on the sun's magnetic field strength, and found out, look, it's a positive multiple magnetic fields. And once you break a complex waveform down into its component parts, no different really than what Martin Armstrong does by saying that there's all of these different pi cycles for all of these different systems, and then the interference and the amplification of those things in concert with each other create the world we see around us. So, Bruce Marshall, have I watched the Electric Universe YouTube channel videos? I have not, but I've begun to start watching more interesting stuff on YouTube than the latest board game reviews, because that's what I do to decompress. Just, love me my board games. Okay, so yeah. So I want you to understand that what she's done is unpack a predictive model for the sun's behavior. And that can then be translated into real math to figure out how much we're going to lose, energy we're going to lose because of this effect. And the numbers are staggering. At best, the IPCC says that the global warming, that the warming forcing due to CO2 and methane is around 1.5 watts per meter squared. The net loss that Zarkova is predicting is around 8. So now let's now back up for a second. Yeah, I have seen a little bit of stuff about the Electric Universe, and I really need to kind of watch more about this stuff. But let's just not be doctrinaire about this. Let's just talk about this let's just spitball. Let's just be skeptics for a minute. Let's say that the IPCC is correct. Right? That CO2, 1.5 watts per meter squared. Correct. Let's go with it. I'm willing to give them that number. Let's say her math is off by 50%. That puts her off by, that's 4. Let's give her no benefit of the doubt. Let's give them every benefit of the doubt. The numbers are still fucking rotten. Lisa Pate, the most awesome part was exactly that. Her theoretical data matched up so well with observation. That's what science is supposed to do. Something else I'm going to put into your heads. Okay? Something you have to understand. It is very, very rare that complex systems can be reduced to a single predictive first order transformation of raw data. First order, not second order, not third order. You know, if you know anything about higher order math, you know what I'm talking about. We're not talking about third order polynomial fits or whatever. We're not talking about the second, third, fourth, fifth derivative, effectively, of the data. Having to transform it once, not once, but twice or 3 or 4 times. First order fit. It's like when talking about rates, chemical reaction rates, 99% of them are first order fits. Meaning they vary with 1 over the temperature. They don't vary over 1 over the temperature squared, or 1 over the temperature cubed, or 1 over the temperature to the 4th power, but 1 over the temperature, period. The Arrhenius equation, period. Simple, direct, easy, straight fucking line, done. Log plot, half log plot's a straight freaking line, done. Okay? To see data like that produce results like that are stunning. And you know why they're stunning? Because they, by definition, most likely are correct. Because you've uncovered a fundamental truth about the universe. It's like the Gibbs energy equation. Like the Schrodinger equation. Certain things that just, and those things are still, and again, I ain't skeptical. May be wrong. She may have created a tautology. Find out. That's a show. I'm done. I'm out. It's 1 hour and 3 minutes. No, it doesn't translate into minus 8 degrees C, her ambience goes. It just translates into translates into a very rapid cool off. All right. But that's the show. You guys, if you like what you heard tonight, as always, please give a like and subscribe down below. We're up to about 1,100 people. I'm not going to monetize this channel anytime soon. We're still not really deciding how we're going to go about it, but it's really not necessary. If you guys do, I love the idea of monetizing super chats. It's not really the best way to go. The best thing to do here is to simply say, look, if you guys want to donate, you're not subscribers to my Patreon, and that's fine. You want to donate to what I do, I put my PayPal address in the link to the video down below. That would be great. You just send me a donation that way. That would be fantastic. But otherwise, I don't care. Just show up every Monday night at 8, Friday night at 8:30 for the Gold Goats and Guns Hour. My name is Tom Luongo. Keep your stick on the ice.